Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stands Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 79, brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear. Today we're talking with Dan Infalt for part 3 of our Hunting the Wind DIY Report mini-series, and today we're covering hunting the wind in swamps. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you all are doing well out there. And for those of you who have had the opportunity to go afield, I hope that you've had some good luck. I know, kind of watching social media here the past week or so, I've seen plenty of big deer hit the ground. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that I was a little bit jealous. I definitely want to make one of those Western trips here in the not so distant future for a whitetail hunt. Of course, last year I did do an elk hunt. Didn't get the opportunity. Well, I shouldn't say I didn't get the opportunity to go this year. I chose not to go for some familiar reasons, and taking this year off from that. And then next year I don't think I'll get to go out west either, because I should draw an Iowa tag and will be spending several weeks in Iowa, next year. So it'll eat up most of my vacation time. So maybe the year after, but definitely it's in the plans to do an early season Western hunt, because it just looks super cool. Looks like a lot of fun. The temperatures, however, didn't look so super cool, which is something that might be a little bit different hunting whitetails in some sweltering heat. But I guess I won't have to wait nearly as long as some folks. I know the Pennsylvania State Opener is the 29th of September, and I'm going to assume that that's mostly, I believe every other state by that point will be open. But I live near two management units, or wildlife management units here in Pennsylvania, that actually open early. So if you listen to this on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, I will be in a tree on Saturday. So really looking forward to getting back to a tree stand. Been doing plenty of practice. I'm pretty well dialed in with my bow, ready to go. I still have to, of course, last minute style, I still have to kind of get all my stuff ready. Got to wash all my clothes, do all that kind of scent prep and things of that nature. But for the most part, everything's ready to roll. I did just switch out some my arrows. I got some new arrows that I'm trying out this year, some day 6 arrows. So super stoked to be using those. Just got those built, and kind of tuned my bow to those, and been shooting those for the past couple of days, and they're awesome. The arrow is, I think, 70 grains heavier than what I was previously shooting, so there's definitely some thump down range with those bad boys. And I think probably the first set I'll do, I'm probably going to end up heading to that piece of swamp ground that I got access to. I went and checked some cameras today. Unfortunately, the SD card kind of took a crash on me, so I didn't have anything on the camera card, so that was kind of a bummer. But we'll go in there and see what happens. In the early season, I did see some tracks in there, so it's getting used. It's really that first set. I'm really just kind of looking to get back into a tree and maybe put a doe in the freezer. And that's my plan for the early part of the year. I'm not sure about the opener, what I might do there. Still kind of waiting and seeing how things kind of pan out over the course of the next couple weeks in terms of what I see on camera and what the weather might look like. But regardless, really looking to getting back into a tree stand, and can't wait for the season to get kicked off here this past weekend. Had some nice cool weather, so it really got me kind of jonesing. But before we jump into our podcast, so this is part 3 of the DIY report mini-series we did with Dan Infalt on hunting the wind, this one in swamps. I wanted to pass along some information, so those of you out there listening might be able to get involved in this giveaway. So Ramcat is, of course, one of our partners here, is doing a monster buck challenge, and they're giving away, I think it's $2,500 worth of Arcus hunting equipment. So this will be everything from, an Obsession bow to the Dead Downwind products to Ramcat broadheads, tinks, lures, and Trophy Taker rest. So there's a package, $2,500 package that they're going to be giving away. They're going to give away 2 packages actually, and all you have to do to get involved in this is if you need to use a Ramcat broadhead to harvest your buck this year, and then submit it to Arcus through tagging your image in social media with hashtag MonsterBuckChallenge, and then email your photo to the to Arcus Media, or Arcus, the Arcus company, and the email address you would use to do that would be marketing@arcushunting.com. If you do that, they'll do a drawing, and what they're looking to do is pick two of the largest typical or non-typical whitetails that are harvested between 9/1, so September 1st, 2018, and December 31st, 2018. So if you do those things, so again, I'll try to make it simpler here. I thought probably made it more confusing than it needed to be. Essentially, buy some Ramcat broadheads, use them to harvest your deer, submit the deer that you harvest with your Ramcat broadheads to Arcus Media by posting them images of them on social media using hashtag MonsterBuckChallenge, and then emailing them a photo at marketing@arcushunting.com. That'll get you entered to win, and they will choose the largest typical or non-typical whitetail that was harvested between 9/1 and 12/31 using a Ramcat broadhead. And then the two winners will be given prizes totaling in the $2,500 range, which will include things like Obsession bows, Dead Downwind, Trophy Taker rests, and Ramcat broadheads and Tink lures. So kill a big deer this year and enter that contest using some Ramcat broadheads, and hopefully you'll be coming away with some cool stuff. But with that, let's go ahead and turn our attention really quickly to talk about a couple of our partners that help us make this podcast possible. First and foremost, we are brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear, the longest, lastest, fastest cutting, toughest tree trimming equipment you've ever used. Simply put, the toughest saws on earth. How tough are they? Tough enough to come with a lifetime warranty. And right now, when you visit wickedtreegear.com, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and get a 20% discount on your Wicked purchase. We're also brought to you by the Exodus Outdoor Gear. The Trek camera comes in at a nice price point of $145, and it has the same proprietary shell design as the Lift Series camera, the same 5-year warranty, and unmatched customer service policy. Great photo, video, time-lapse modes, and hybrid modes, and this all comes with a single-line backlit LED display. You'll also get about 20,000 images on one set of lithium batteries. If you'd like to learn more, go to ExodusOutdoorGear.com and check them out. If you like what you see, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and save yourself $20. So with that, we have part 3 with Dan Infalt, talking some hunting the wind in swamps. And without further ado, let's get the big buck serial killer on the line. All right, folks, welcome back. We are live, and you're listening to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast DIY Report mini-series, part number 3, talking hunting the wind with our big buck serial. Oh, I just totally screwed this up. The big buck serial killer. There we go. Got it right. Mr. Dan Infalt, what's going on, buddy?
It's going good.
Good. I butchered your serial killer name there. Now people may just think you are a serial killer instead of the big buck serial killer. That might not do.
At least you didn't introduce me as Don Infalt or something.
No, I didn't do that. I'd probably just close up shop if that happened. But so thanks again for joining. This is part number 3. The first 2 parts we covered, hunting the wind, and we got into a little bit more than hunting the wind in the past 2 sections, but really focusing on farm country in the first one, and then hill country in this one. And the theme so far, in my mind and what I've been picking up is, hunting with that, or accessing or using the wind with that kind of like side wind to a degree, and especially whenever you're accessing. Today on this episode, we're going to talk about hunting swamps and using the wind. And I know, before we hit record, I was telling you I'm going to be a little selfish on this one because, I'm a guy who grew up in Western PA and hunt, Western PA, Ohio, and then, I live in Eastern PA now. So a lot of it's been hill country and farm country for most of my life. And I just recently, this past week, got access to a piece of ground that has some swamp in it. And I've been really excited to kind of try swamp hunting because it's something I've never done before. But I also know that it's a place where people don't like to go, so there's a good chance there's going to be good deer there. So with that, I want to start off by asking, we always kind of talk about bedding first because you're going to use the wind based on where deer are bedding. So give me the Dan Infalt tutorial on finding buck beds and bedded bucks in swampland.
Okay, well, it's a little different than the hill and the farm that we talked about in the last podcast, because the bucks are more bedded in thick cover. So they're bedded more based on sound than they are on sight or wind direction. So they're bedded in something thick where you can't get close to them unless you splash, make muck noises or break branches. So the wind's a little less critical in their bedding. I wouldn't say it's not critical, and there's not wind-specific bedding, but it's a little less critical, so it makes it a little easier.
Okay. So whenever you were talking about bedded bucks, or I assume we're looking for, whatever the high ground is, right? That's kind of like I guess let's start at the top of view. Like when you're looking at a map, is that what you're kind of trying to detail out? Is where's that high ground that's going to remain dry?
I'm looking for high ground in water mostly, because those mature bucks love to be surrounded by water, but they want to be on something dry. They can't bed right into water. They'd get hypothermia and die. They can't do it. When you find a bed that's full of water, it's because it flooded. They bed on dirt or ground, but they can bed on a little hump sticking out of the water. So all you're looking for is something where high ground transitions slow into water. Like points often have that, where as the point goes into the water, you have dogwood, and you have trees that grow in that kind of water area, and those trees will create humps. So some of it will be underwater, some of it won't, and it'll be a thick area. And those are the kind of places they prefer to bed. So I'm really looking at the transition of that swamp. Cattail marshes are a great example because they're so easy to look at and read because of the contrast of cattails to trees. So what you're looking at is that rim where the cattails meet the trees. And you're looking for some sort of change in that terrain, like a point going out into those cattails of trees, or a bowl going into the woods that's got mixed trees and cattails, or an island out in there, right?
Right.
Well, a swamp's the exact same thing, except for in a swamp, there's trees in the water areas, and it's a lot harder to see because there's not the contrast of the cattails. But it's exactly the same if you can take a step back and read it, that same transition line where the water meets the high ground kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's where the bucks are going to be bedded in the same kind of spots.
So when you're talking, and it totally makes sense whenever you're talking about, where they're bedding, the sound is going to be, important because you're going to make a lot more noise walking in there, and the wind may be less important, in terms of where they're bedding. But, one of the things we've talked about in the past two podcasts was access, and that's, really strongly based on what the wind is doing in relationship where the bucks are bedding. But now that we're having to deal with like the added element of this significant noise, like how do you access in a swamp? I guess, and I'm asking really for me at this point because I'm going, if I'm not worried about wind too much and I'm going to make a lot of noise and you have to get relatively close, how do you access in these types of areas?
Well, it depends on where they're bedding. When they're bedding on the transition line of hard ground in water, it's not too hard. But you just take the high ground to them and you keep the wind to your advantage. But when they're in a swamp, like out on a small island or something, that can be a little tricky. And there are some spots where I cannot get near them, because of noise in the evenings. So I'll make an attempt at it in the morning, or I'll just kick them out of there so you don't bed there and hunt them where I can. Now, when you look at the transition along high ground, a lot of times what will happen is on those points is it's the opposite of hill country, kind of. So you're thinking that they're bedded there with the wind blowing down that point. But what I'm finding is they bed on that point. You know what I mean by point? The point of timber that shapes like an arrow point going out into either cattails or swamp.
Yeah, it kind of juts out and it makes a little, just like an arrow almost kind of sticking out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, but it's not like a hill point.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of similar, right?
Right.
So when you look at the tip of that, if the wind is blowing towards the timber, like into the point, towards the woods, you can expect them to bed right on the edge of that swamp looking up the point.
So
and you'll see beds in relation to that. You'll see rubs there and beds where he can see you coming down that point.
Right. So are you saying...
If you go a little further... Go ahead.
I was going to say, are you saying he's looking out the point into like the swamp to a degree? Like
he's watching you coming. No, okay. He's watching you coming. He's looking into the woods.
Okay, gotcha.
Up the point.
Yep.
Now, if the wind's blowing down the point and it's blowing into the swamp, into the cattails, whichever you have, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's going to be further into the cattails or swamp at a transition or under a hump of, on a hump under a tree or something, he's going to be further out. So you're going to see beds right on that point, and you're going to see them 20, 30, or 50 yards into the swamp. And that's what those are going to be, is for the different wind directions. And you can tell because of the shape of the bed. They're going to have the obstacle to their back or whatever, or if they're in a completely thick cover, the bend of their back, you can see which way they're bedded. And they're always, even if there's a sound bed, they're bedding with that wind to their back.
Right.
They just turn to have it to their back.
So with all that water around, or being as damp as it is, right? Like, I'm imagining the thermals kind of play hell in that area. Is that true? And what's kind of dictating like the consistency or the inconsistency of the wind in those situations?
Now, when we were talking about hill country, you got to live and die by thermals. There's no way to beat thermals in hill country. You got to predict them and know what it's going to do. You might not know what the wind direction is going to do. That can be fickle, but that thermal is always going to be consistent. It's going to do the same thing every morning and every evening. But when you get in swamps, it's a little different. I find spots do the same thing, but not every spot does the same thing. It has a lot to do with water temperature. So water thermals are regulated by how hot that water gets during the day when it heats up from the sun, or how cold that water is at some point, colder than the air. When it's warm, it's going to be heating the air above it, and that air is going to be rising, and it sucks the air in from the dry land, which is the common problem we have to deal with swamps. So if you set up in the middle of a point with a deer coming out to the side or coming out of the water, and you can expect your thermal to pull down to that water where that deer is. So a lot of times if it's a little hump of a point or a little hump of an island or something, I'll make sure I'm on the edge on the opposite side, so my scent is pulling out into that swamp before it rises. Or you can set up right in the water and have your wind go straight up, and then a deer could be right underneath you. It won't smell you.
Yeah, I remember watching a video that you did with milkweed, sitting over, I think it was in a swamp over a water hole, throwing milkweed and watching your milkweed kind of float out. It would hit that water and shoot straight up in the air.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So so let me ask this. So are you setting up a stand location? So say they're betting on that point.
Mm-hmm.
Are you setting up where it transitions from swamp to just say hardwood, for example, or whatever the timber line is? Or are you sitting a little further in the timber line?
I'm sitting as close to that bed as I can get, that I'm outside of his sight, smell, and sound. So, and that's one of the best things about swamp is I can get a lot of times 50, 75 yards from them. A lot of times I can see them when they stand up. But you can't do that in hill or farm usually. You have to be way further back. So I'm getting really close. So I'm usually real close to that swamp edge. And, I need to be. A lot of the deer I'm shooting, I'm watching them get out of their bed, 50, 75 yards from me as far as mature deer go. And I'm shooting them at closing time. If you're 200 yards back, you ain't got a chance in hell.
Right. Yeah. Do you run into any issues? Because swamp is one of those areas where, at least, I'll just give you the example, the piece that I got access to, it's not a huge parcel, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I feel like there's going to be deer probably pretty well condensed. And what I can see from topo, because I just got access to it, I haven't had a chance to scout it yet, it seems like the best bedding in general, obviously, is going to be in that swamp area. And I'm imagining most of the deer that are on there are probably going to be somewhere in or near that. So do you run into a lot of situations like that where it's like, yeah, that buck you might be hunting is there, but because all the deer are probably in such close proximity because the swamp area is kind of constricting them or restricting them into a certain area, that you have to be really mindful about any of the, what we talked about earlier, any of the satellite deer at that point? Before we continue our conversation, let's talk about Wicked Tree Gear saws. Hardcore deer hunters need tools that can keep up. We don't baby our gear, taking on whatever Mother Nature dishes out. Check out Wicked Tree Gear hand saws and pull saws at wickedtreegear.com. Use promo code TRUTH to save yourself 20% on your next purchase with free ground shipping. And get a saw that's tough enough to work as hard as you hunt.
Sure, it's no different than what we talked about on farm country, and I hunt some swamp that's got a high population, and you got to be mindful. I mean, but I can still get pretty close without spooking them because they're in that transition usually. So other than farm country where there might be up the tree line further and you don't know exactly where they're going to be and you jump them out of the grass or whatever, you don't see that so much in swamp. They're usually along that transition of swamp, somewhere along that edge of the water, or when you were looking at those topo maps, those little high spots in the swamp where you got a bunch of trees out there in one little tiny spot. But there, I've crept up on a point in the swamp and climbed up a tree and not spooked a deer and had 10 different deer get up within 50 yards of me. Swamp is a lot easier. I mean, you got walls of thick crap all around you. And as long as you're really slow and quiet, you can get right on top of them things and you can get up a tree. The big thing about swamp is people think they're being so noisy going in there because you sound like a freight train going through that crap, right? But the truth of the matter is your sound doesn't travel through that swamp grass and stuff that well. You're hearing it because you're in it. And case in point, I've been out in those cattails, and all of a sudden there's a hunter 20 yards from you, like a pheasant hunter or something. I'm like, where the hell did he come from? Never heard him? Hey, how did he come through so quiet? And he's not trying to be quiet. He's a pheasant hunter.
Right.
Well, the thing is that sound, before it gets to me, is hitting a wall of cattails. So those deer aren't hearing you as much as you think they are in that type of terrain because they're down in the thick cover. Now, when you get up a tree, the sounds you make are a lot more critical. Now, you break a branch or something that's going to hear you and look up and see you, and that's where you have to really be slow. But you can get right on top of them things.
Right. So, I mean, I guess for me, like, since this is my first swamp endeavor, like, what are like the 3 critical things I need to be mindful of? Or let me start this way. What are the things that I should really be looking for when I first step foot on this property? I'll do some topo scouting and stuff like that, but when I set foot on this property, what are the main things I should be really looking for?
Look for points jutting out into that swamp. Look for high ground in that swamp. So get a good basis of where they're bedding, and then get a good basis on where they're feeding. If you have acorns at the time that you're hunting, swamps can be the best thing in the world. I know it gets a little away from your wind theme, but it's worth mentioning, is that when you're in hill country or farm country, in a lot of cases, they can bed really, really close to those acorns and you can't get near them. But in swamps, they're going to move to those acorns, but they're going to bed in the swamp. And those points are usually high enough ground that they have good oaks on them. And those deer are going to bed off those points, get up and go to that first acorn tree and start eating. And some of my best luck in swamps has been based on points going into those swamps with oak trees.
Right. So I'm trying to think. I just had a question that I wanted to ask, and I just totally lost it.
And then too, a lot of times I'm setting up on an off wind, not the wind in my face, because of what we said earlier. If I'm going down that point and the wind's in my face, those bucks are better on the edge. What should be coming down that point? Now I can only get so close, right?
Right.
So if he's just going to make it to that first oak tree, now I'm going to sit way back and watch it beat under that oak tree, and there's nothing I can do about it. So if I wait till I get the wind blowing in there at him, put on a little bit of a crosswind, just a little bit of an off wind, one way or the other, and I get to the side I need to be so it's not blowing at those beds. Now I can slide up along the edge real slow, and now he's bedded further back, in sound cover because of the wind disadvantage. Now I can get close to the tip and get him right when he gets up to that first oak tree. But if you do it on the wrong day and get too far back, he's going to smell that you're there, and now you burn that spot.
Right. I didn't even think of oaks in a swamp because that's, being restricted in an area, right? It's like, and you have the one prime food source during that time of the year nearby you. That's got to be dynamite. And so I'm remembering what I was going to ask. So we talked earlier about how deer are kind of entering and exiting their beds, and this is when we were talking in farm country where you had mentioned that when a deer's leaving their bed, they're really not minding the wind so much. They're more interested in it whenever they're entering to make sure that they're kind of looking out for danger. Do you see any differences in how deer kind of enter or exit beds in swamp versus whether hill country or farm country, or is it the same?
No, they just pretty much get up and go from point A to point B. They just they feed their way. They go slow and they stage, waiting for darkness. So you got to get within that window, but it's pretty much the same. The only difference is that makes you have an advantage in swamp terrain, especially in early season,
mm-hmm.
is that you can get so close.
Right. So with all of that, and we talked about your stand locations and kind of how you like to set up on swamp, is there anything that you feel that is critical that I need to kind of take into consideration, especially, dealing with wind and swamp that we didn't cover? Or do you think I have the cliff notes to go ahead and give it a sachet?
Yeah, I think you pretty much got it. I think if there's one thing I'd say about the wind in relation to swamp, differing from like hill country, is that when you get rut, like in hill country, you can really predict that travel on that 1/3 line.
Mm-hmm.
But in the swamps, during the rut, I have a really hard time getting them to come out where I can shoot them. They stay in that thick stuff. It's a lot harder to hunt them.
Interesting.
Just based on the wind or something like you can in hill country.
Right. That's interesting. So that's good to kind of keep in mind. So at that point, I mean, are they just staying back in the thick stuff to where you can't get a shot, or do you have a move at some point to where you can kind of get in a little closer, or is it just one of those things because of the nature of the way the swamps are?
I think about the Cattail Marsh, and often I'm sitting there watching them in the cattails running around in circles chasing. I can't even see them, or you just get a glimpse of the antlers or something. And it's so thick that you have to be right on top of the trail and shoot exactly straight down in order to kill them. I mean, the stuff's 10 feet tall and it's a wall. They'll go downwind of dole bedding. They'll cross the trails of dole bedding, but killing them things is hard. And the biggest advantage I find to getting them in the swamps really doesn't have nothing to do with wind as much, but it's finding a little open area, real small open area that connects two thick areas.
Right. Awesome.
And where they cross, you can kill them.
I feel
as far as rut goes.
I feel much better now about headed into my swamp endeavor here. I'll keep you posted if it's anything like the advice that I got from you for the hill country and the deer I put on my wall from Ohio. Then you might have another bottle of bourbon coming your way, my friend. So we'll keep our fingers,
all right.
We'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Awesome, man. So that kind of concludes our 3 parts. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all this information. Before I let you go, though, if you wouldn't mind, just let folks know where they could find out more information about you. I know you've got some exciting stuff happening, personally with some beast stuff. So if you can kind of indulge us, if you can share it, feel free to do so.
Sure. Saturday, that might even be before you release these. I don't know, but Saturday we're releasing the beast sticks, the climbing sticks that I made that are they're 2 pounds. They're made for mobile guys. Built them for myself, and then some of my business partners got so excited about them, they said, "You have to sell these." And I don't have this huge advantage over everybody, but I guess we're going to do it.
Get rid of all your secrets, man.
But you can find out more about me by going to my forum, which is a website where we chat in depth about tactics, and that's thehuntingbeast.com. Or you can find me on Facebook. I've got a good YouTube channel. Got some really good hunts in there that go into detail about tactics. You might have to dig through a few of me chasing raccoons down and catching them or something, but
right.
I like the fun videos too.
Right.
But the YouTube video is pretty cool, and I've got some really in-depth tactical DVDs that I sell on my website. That are pretty popular.
Yeah.
So, you haven't seen them.
Yeah. I will just say that the Hunting Beast is probably one of the, if not the best resource for really kind of becoming a hardcore bow hunter, in my opinion, and beyond all the tactical stuff that everyone shares on there. Like, I've met some of the best dudes that I'm actually now really good friends with on the Beast. Guys that I would have never met before, that are dudes I go to and I shoot, Total Archery Challenge shoots with those guys. They'll come in from New York and we'll travel together and go shoot together. We started hunting together. It was a guy from my hometown who I never knew, like, a day in my life, that we connected on a Hunting Beast, and we hunt the same areas back home. So it's just a bunch of cool dudes. I will give it that shameless plug that it's definitely worth checking out. And Dan, I just want to say thanks to you, man. You do a lot of cool stuff for hunters. You do it the right way, and you always have our back, and we appreciate that. And so thanks for coming on, and thanks for being you, and I'll talk to you soon, hopefully.
Sure, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show, and that is, in fact, a wrap for this DIY Report mini-series with Dan. I'd like to, of course, thank him for joining us, and be sure to visit his website, thehuntingbeast.com, and follow along on the Hunting Beast Facebook group page. Super great hunters, and awesome guys just in general. If there's any questions you have about deer hunting in general, this is a great place to go and ask the question. No question is off limits. Everyone is there to help and learn. It's probably one of the best places, if not the best place, to kind of sharpen your hunting skills with some guys who have been getting it done for a long time. So great place. Check both of those places out. We'd, of course, like to thank all of you for following along here on the podcast. If you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do those two things for us. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Wicked Tree Gear, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Trophy Ridge, Ozonics, Obsession Bows, Tecumani Seed, Glacier Coolers, Ramcat Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, and Dead Downwind. And until next time, we'll see you.